You think support always means safety, but money rewrites hidden loyalties. Some of the kindest smiles secretly wait for your collapse. If you want to see who silently bets against you, watch money. Money does not only buy comfort, it rearranges invisible status maps in every mind. When your financial position rises, the mental position of others feels threatened. They smiled when you were harmless, now they quietly calculate your new weight. This is how money creates rivals who clap for you while craving your fall. Jealousy is not always loud. Sometimes it wears the mask of rational concern. A quiet rival rarely attacks directly. That would expose their insecurity too fast. They prefer a softer method. They offer support on the surface, doubt underneath. Their words sound caring, but their emotional intention leans gently toward your failure. Dark psychology studies this tension between spoken support and unspoken threat. When someone feels inferior but cannot admit it, they seek subtle balance. If they cannot rise higher than you, they secretly wish you would drop. Your success becomes a constant reminder of their own delayed progress and regret. Machiavelli once said, if you want to test loyalty, offer advantage. Advantage can be money, status, or access to powerful opportunities. When you receive it, watch who becomes colder behind encouraging words. The more you rise, the more their politeness feels controlled and calculated. There is a quiet emotional formula running in the background of every interaction. If your growth makes them feel smaller, their mind looks for psychological relief. The easiest relief is this hidden equation: your failure equals their emotional comfort. They will never admit this, even to themselves, yet their micro-reactions expose it. Notice what happens when you share good news about financial progress or opportunity. Some people respond with genuine calm happiness. Their body feels relaxed and open. Others respond with praise, but something sharp hides inside their choice of words. They quickly mention risks, past failures, and stories where everything suddenly collapsed. They are not warning you for your safety, they are feeding their fantasy. The fantasy is simple: if you fall, the inner pressure on them decreases. Your fall would prove their secret belief that trying is dangerous and foolish. Your stumble would justify their own decision to stay small and comfortable. Albert Bandura once explained that people justify harm by changing how they see others. When someone quietly resents your success, they mentally shrink your humanity. They start viewing you as a symbol of arrogance, greed, or undeserved luck. Once this mental distance is built, your failure feels less like real harm. This is the silent psychology of emotional draining support. A quiet rival acts supportive while slowly weakening your inner stability. They ask about your goals, but emphasize everything that could go wrong. They remind you of every flaw and every past mistake in detail. They say they want you grounded, but they actually want you doubtful. They say they want you safe, but they actually want you stuck. Their questions do not expand your thinking, they suffocate your confidence. After every conversation, you feel heavier, slower, more uncertain about each step. You rarely notice this pattern at first, because it hides behind familiar care. They use a soft voice, calm words, and relatable examples from everyday life. They act like experienced guides who have seen many dreams collapse before. Their secret goal is not your growth, it is their emotional relief. Quiet rivals rarely attack your money directly. Instead, they attack your belief system. They know if your mind breaks, your decisions will destroy your own progress. So they plant suggestions that money will corrupt you or isolate you completely. These ideas sound wise, but they mainly serve to keep you small. Another tactic is delayed enthusiasm. They praise your progress only after safety. When your success still looks fragile, they stay distant and mildly skeptical. When your success becomes impossible to deny, they quickly rewrite their memory. They claim they always believed in you, they just wanted you cautious. This rewrite protects their self-image. They cannot accept they once hoped you failed. So they create a story where their fear was actually wise guidance. You sense something off, but you doubt your own perception and intuition. That doubt is their victory because it keeps their mask firmly in place. The most dangerous rivals are not open enemies, they are controlled chameleons. They mirror your language, your dreams, even your values on the surface. Inside, they run a quiet simulation of your potential collapse and humiliation. Every time they imagine it, a small part of their stress reduces. Dark psychology reveals that money amplifies existing traits rather than creating new ones. If someone already felt inferior and unseen, your growth pressures their old wounds. Your rising influence feels like proof that they wasted time and opportunity. Instead of facing this pain, they project it onto you as criticism. They will call your ambition selfish while secretly craving the same power. They will call your investments risky while envying the courage they never used. They will question your new circle while longing for similar access and respect. Their resentment grows every time life confirms that your risks are paying off. The draining part is not their words alone, it is their emotional field. You feel watched, evaluated, and silently measured against invisible standards. You start editing your victories, sharing less, underplaying your progress and wins. You train yourself to be smaller so they can stay emotionally comfortable. This is how quiet rivals win. They keep you under your real capacity. They never needed to sabotage your work directly. They sabotaged your internal fire. Your mind begins to fear, triggering their hidden jealousy and resentment. Soon you protect their emotions more than you protect your own future. The real secret is simple. Many people love you more when you lose. Your setbacks keep the social balance familiar and soothing for their insecurity. Your struggles allow them to feel wise, stable, and morally superior to you. Your suffering becomes their proof that staying safe was the correct decision. The question that haunts this entire system is unsettling. If money exposes who quietly bets against you, what will your next win reveal about the people you still call supportive? You think silence means goodwill, but silence often hides emotional tension. You assume support is pure, but support can carry invisible fear. If you want to see who quietly resists your rise, listen between words. The psychology of quiet rivals becomes clearer when you study emotional displacement. When someone feels threatened by your financial growth, they cannot admit it openly. Admitting it would expose a wound they desperately hide from themselves. So they create psychological substitutes, subtle actions that release pressure. One substitute is controlled encouragement, a pattern that appears kind but feels hollow. They speak in calm tones, but their emotional energy stays distant and defensive. Their praise arrives slower, their reactions feel delayed and strangely rehearsed. This is not because they lack words, it is because they lack comfort with your rise. Machiavelli once said, if you rise too fast, envy rises faster. This envy does not always display anger. Sometimes it appears as sophisticated restraint. A quiet rival uses restraint as a shield. It helps them hide the turmoil inside. They speak softly, but their thoughts twist with imbalance and self-comparison. Emotional draining begins in the smallest interactions, often in comments you ignore. They ask genuine-sounding questions, then insert uncertainty that weakens your momentum. They use phrases that appear protective but subtly diminish your confidence. You walk away wondering why your motivation feels slightly damaged. When money enters any environment, it acts like a psychological amplifier. People who once felt equal now sense a shift that challenges their identity. Their hidden belief is simple: your progress invalidates the excuses they lived with. This creates resentment, but resentment wrapped in politeness feels almost invisible. Banjura once explained that people distort perception to justify harmful actions. A quiet rival mentally reframes your success as dangerous or excessive. This protects them from confronting their own lack of effort or discipline. Once this mental shift is complete, your failure starts to feel morally acceptable. Notice the specific emotional patterns of a quiet rival. They celebrate your small wins, but their tone changes near your big wins. Small wins keep you relatable and safe. Big wins threaten their internal stability. So their support becomes conditional, soft when you rise too high, warm when you fall slightly. Conditional support is the most draining form of psychological influence. It trains you to regulate your own success to protect their comfort. You start lowering your excitement to avoid triggering their hidden jealousy. This self-suppression becomes a silent habit, repeated without awareness. The human mind naturally seeks social equilibrium. When someone feels inferior, they try restoring balance in subtle psychological ways. Some try to elevate themselves, others try to pull you down silently. Quiet rivals always choose the second method because it feels safer. They attack your belief in long-term stability, not your current achievement. They remind you of financial storms, failed ventures, and unpredictable losses. They do this not to warn you, but to soothe their fear of your future influence. If you lose stability, they regain psychological control in the social hierarchy. The draining effect intensifies when they start comparing you to imagined failures. They mention people who rose too fast and collapsed spectacularly. They recall distant stories where confidence turned into arrogance. Their message is clear: success is dangerous and caution is your new prison. These comparisons are not teaching moments, they are emotional weapons. Their goal is to make your success feel heavy, risky, and morally questionable. You begin doubting your own ability, even when progress is real and earned. This doubt slowly becomes a psychological leash that keeps you restrained. Quiet rivals are careful, they never show complete resistance. They sprinkle admiration, but mix it with subtle fear-based narratives. This blend confuses your intuition because you cannot categorize their behavior. Their mask looks supportive, their energy feels conflicted, their intention stays hidden. When money shifts your position, the social landscape around you also shifts. Some people step back because they cannot match your pace or courage. Others step closer because they want access to your resources and status. Quiet rivals stay exactly where they are, but their internal world collapses. They cannot move up, they cannot move away, so they build emotional armor. This armor helps them pretend loyalty, but inside it contains bitterness. The bitterness grows with each achievement you reach without their involvement. Your independence feels like rejection to them, even when you never excluded anyone. The deepest psychological twist appears when they begin copying you. They study your habits, your mindset, even your resilience under pressure. They do this not out of admiration, but out of fear of staying behind. Copying you becomes their way of competing without admitting the competition. But imitation rarely gives them real progress, so frustration grows. When frustration grows, their masked encouragement turns sharper. Their tone carries hidden tension, their looks contain silent judgment. You sense this shift, but cannot explain it logically to anyone. Dark psychology reveals that money exposes emotional contracts never spoken aloud. Some people secretly believed you would always stay below them in life. Your growth violates that unspoken contract, and now they must rewrite their identity. Rewriting identity is painful, so they redirect the pain toward you. Their subtle goal becomes psychological equalization. If they cannot rise, they hope your path breaks at some point. Their words push you toward hesitation, withdrawal, or unnecessary caution. Your lowered momentum restores the old social balance they miss. You begin to feel a strange emotional fatigue around them. Not because they attack openly, but because they drain silently. Their presence feels heavy, their support feels conditional, their praise feels rehearsed. You sense they want your success to pause, just long enough for them to catch up. The question that now emerges is darker and more uncomfortable. If silent rivals use emotional draining to equalize your rise, what hidden tactic will they use when they realize your next financial step will outgrow every fear they hold? You think you can sense danger early, but quiet rivalry hides behind calm faces. You assume people change only when situations change, but money changes their identity. If you want to see real intentions, observe how they react to your certainty. The deeper structure of silent rivalry begins with psychological scarcity. When someone believes opportunity is limited, your growth feels like their loss. They do not say this aloud, yet their mind treats your progress as personal subtraction. This creates an internal conflict between admiration and envy that shapes every response. Quiet rivals operate through subtle emotional calibration. They do not attack your goals, they attack the energy that fuels your goals. They keep you slightly uncertain, slightly cautious, slightly self-doubting. These small shifts seem harmless individually, but together they weaken your internal drive. Machiavelli once said, if you cannot defeat someone, weaken their belief. Quiet rivals apply this principle without even realizing it consciously. They adjust their tone, their expressions, their questions with strategic softness. They disguise discouragement inside responsible-sounding language. Dark psychology shows that emotional draining often comes from indirect techniques. The first technique is redefinition. They redefine your ambition as a potential threat. Not a threat to you, but a threat to them and their fragile sense of stability. They speak about balance, but their version of balance means you must stay small. The second technique is moral positioning. They frame your ambition as excessive. They use phrases that sound ethical, but the intent is psychological restraint. They say growth needs humility, but what they really mean is stop before surpassing them. Their caution is not wisdom, it is disguised envy wearing a polite mask. The third technique is emotional mirroring. They pretend to share your concerns. This creates an illusion of mutual understanding that lowers your psychological guard. Once your guard is down, they plant ideas that slow your progress without resistance. Their influence works because it feels like your own careful thinking. Bandura once wrote that people justify harmful actions by reshaping their moral lens. A quiet rival reshapes their view of your success until supporting you feels dangerous. They convince themselves that your failure would actually protect you from arrogance. With this belief, any emotional harm they cause feels justified and even noble. This moral distortion is the foundation of hidden rivalry. They create a story in their mind where they are the wise observer. In that story, your success becomes a test you are too immature to handle. Your setbacks become lessons that validate their superior judgment. The psychological danger is not their words, but their invisible expectations. They expect you to slow down, they expect you to doubt yourself, they expect you to break. Their mind prepares for your fall long before you sense anything is wrong. Their calm presence hides a quiet anticipation that poisons your emotional clarity. Notice how they behave when you show confidence. Your confidence triggers a micro-freeze, their face tightens for a second. Their eyes narrow slightly, as if recalculating the social equation. Your certainty disrupts their expectation of your collapse, and they must adjust again. A quiet rival experiences 3 internal reactions when you rise. First reaction is disbelief. They cannot accept your shift in status. Second reaction is resentment. They feel punished by your success. Third reaction is justification. They convince themselves you will eventually fall. Your confidence threatens their justification the most. If you remain focused and stable, their entire emotional illusion collapses. Their resentment has no outlet, their inferiority has no protection, their mask weakens. So they push harder but with softer words, because softness hides intention better. You begin noticing patterns that feel familiar, yet unsettling. Their questions always focus on what might go wrong, never on what you can improve. Their tone grows slightly heavier every time you speak about opportunity or growth. Their praise is shorter, their analysis is longer, their energy feels imbalanced. This is the emotional blueprint of quiet rivalry. They want you confident enough to keep moving, but not confident enough to surpass them. They want you strong, but not stronger than the version of you they can handle. They want you successful, but only within the limits of their emotional comfort. Some rivals stay silent because speaking would expose their inner conflict. Others speak more because speaking allows them to plant doubt more effectively. Both types work toward the same instinctive goal, the preservation of psychological hierarchy. The person who once felt equal now feels emotionally displaced by your growth. Dark psychology exposes this hidden displacement as one of the strongest human triggers. People fear losing their social position more than losing physical comfort. Your rising influence threatens the identity they built over many years. Your success forces them to confront the truth they avoided, the truth of wasted time. And when someone is forced to face that truth, they look for escape. Escape can come as denial, criticism, or distant silence that grows colder each day. Escape can also come as forced friendliness that feels strangely artificial. Their eyes smile, but their emotions remain locked behind invisible walls. The draining effect intensifies when they begin performing selective listening. They listen closely to your worries, but loosely to your achievements. They pick details that support their belief that your journey is unstable. Everything they highlight is something that weakens your certainty. This selective listening becomes psychological conditioning. You begin sharing less positivity because it receives less real response. You begin sharing more doubts because they engage deeply with fear-based topics. Slowly, your mind learns that anxiety gets attention while confidence gets silence. That is how they guide your emotional state without ever telling you what to think. Their silence becomes a signal, their reactions become suggestions, their doubts become habits. Your mind adapts to their emotional cues while believing it is making rational choices. Control without force becomes possible when influence hides behind emotional alignment. The question now rises like a shadow behind every silent smile. If a quiet rival controls your emotional state without words, what will they control when your next financial step challenges every insecurity they hide behind polite support? You think you can read intentions, but intentions shift when pressure arrives. You assume hidden rivalry stays stable, but money multiplies silent reactions. If you want to see true motives, watch how people respond to your clarity. The deeper psychology of quiet rivals begins with comparison loops. Comparison loops activate when someone measures their worth through your success. Each time you rise, their internal scale tips against their identity. They do not dislike your progress, they dislike how your progress exposes their stagnation. This internal imbalance creates a subtle emotional friction. They cannot celebrate you fully because celebration feels like self-punishment. Their mind whispers that your growth means their effort was wasted. The more you expand, the more they shrink in their own mental narrative. Dark psychology explains that people rarely envy money, they envy meaning. Your financial rise represents decisions they avoided, courage they lacked, risks they never took. You become a living reminder of their unrealized potential. So their support becomes symbolic, not sincere, polite, but psychologically fragile. Machiavelli once said, if someone feels overshadowed, they secretly pray for your misstep. They pray quietly, never through words, always through expectation and tension. Their fantasy is simple: if you fall once, the social balance resets. This fantasy protects their ego from confrontation with their own fear of growth. Quiet rivals express this conflict through subtle behavioral distortions. Their tone shifts from supportive to neutral when your success grows too visible. Their expressions become restrained, their listening becomes selective, their enthusiasm decreases. These changes are too small for others to notice, but impossible for you to ignore. The most common distortion is emotional redirection. They redirect every positive update into a warning about hidden danger. They speak about caution while imagining your collapse as psychological relief. Their words seem protective, but their emotional field radiates discomfort. Bandura once wrote that people distort morality to protect their self-image. A quiet rival convinces themselves that discouraging you is responsible guidance. They tell themselves you are moving too fast, too confident, too unaware. This belief allows them to disguise envy as wisdom and fear as maturity. The deeper manipulation appears through emotional pacing. They match your energy only when your progress is small enough to tolerate. When your ambition accelerates, their emotional pace slows down deliberately. Their silence during your breakthroughs becomes louder than their words. This pacing manipulates your internal rhythm. When their energy goes flat, your confidence loses momentum. Your excitement feels misplaced. Your enthusiasm feels exaggerated. You begin regulating your emotional expression to match their comfort level. This is how quiet rivals lower your internal speed without any direct interference. They do not challenge your dream, they challenge your emotional fuel. Once your fuel weakens, your decisions become cautious and delayed. Your hesitation becomes their invisible victory. Another technique quiet rivals use is conversational reframing. When you mention progress, they shift the topic to someone who failed. When you mention strategy, they highlight a flaw that might ruin everything. When you mention growth, they mention limitations disguised as realism. Their realism is not truth, it is psychological self-protection. If your success appears risky, then their inaction appears intelligent. If your path seems unstable, then their comfort zone becomes a wise choice. They rewrite the emotional narrative so they can stay guilt-free while hoping you fail. Over time, you feel emotional fatigue around them. Not because they attack openly, but because they drain silently and consistently. Their presence carries tension that interrupts your clarity and focus. You sense distance, yet their words sound supportive enough to create confusion. This confusion is deliberate, it protects their mask. A quiet rival never wants you to name their intention. If you see the truth, they lose their psychological advantage. Their subtle influence works only when you doubt your own perception. Dark psychology reveals that the mind often trusts familiar negativity more than unfamiliar success. Quiet rivals use this cognitive bias to anchor you to your old identity. They want you to remain the version of yourself that made them comfortable. Your new identity threatens their emotional security, so they sabotage it through suggestion. The sabotage grows sharper when they begin using emotional benchmarks. They remind you of your past mistakes right before a major opportunity. They reference old failures that no longer define you. Their timing is precise, their intention is subtle, but the impact is undeniable. These reminders are not accidental, they are psychological equalizers. If they cannot rise to your level, they will mentally pull you back to theirs. They want your internal identity to remain familiar, predictable, and non-threatening. Your growth disrupts their emotional equilibrium, so they restore balance through doubt. The most dangerous moment arrives when they start predicting your downfall. They phrase it gently, but the message is sharp and intentional. They claim you are ignoring important risks, losing perspective, or moving too fast. These predictions sound like concern, but they serve as emotional traps. If you accept their prediction, you slow yourself down. If you reject their prediction, they call you unrealistic or impulsive. Either choice benefits their emotional agenda. You become trapped in a cycle where your confidence feels like a threat to their comfort. The quiet rival's true fear is not your current success, but your future potential. Your next step could make the difference permanent and irreversible. Their envy could harden, their mask could weaken, their control could disappear. So they intensify their emotional tactics with greater subtlety. The psychological twist now becomes unavoidable. If someone resents your potential more than your success, what happens when your next financial move creates a level of independence they can no longer emotionally influence or control? You think envy is loud, but the quiet kind does the real damage. You assume people want your growth, but many want the version of you they can manage. If you want to stay mentally free, study the silence around your success. Quiet rivalry becomes most dangerous when it shifts from emotional reaction to strategy. At this stage, the rival no longer struggles internally, they begin acting externally. Not with attacks, but with psychological misdirection that shapes your choices. They influence the path you take without touching the destination directly. Dark psychology reveals a phenomenon called narrative steering. Narrative steering happens when someone subtly guides how you explain your own journey. They do not tell you what to think, they tell you how to think about what you think. This indirect method shapes your internal story more than direct advice ever could. Their steering begins with gentle redirection. You present a bold idea, they respond with a softer version of that idea. You express ambition, they suggest a slower, more controlled approach. They guide your momentum downward while appearing supportive. Machiavelli once said, if you cannot stop ambition, dilute it. Quiet rivals excel at this dilution, because dilution does not trigger resistance. Their tone stays calm, their words remain polite, their posture stays relaxed. but the energy behind each statement weakens the strength of your conviction. Narrative steering also involves emotional anchoring. They anchor new doubts to old memories that no longer define you. They remind you of a time when things were unstable or uncertain. These reminders reopen emotional patterns you have already outgrown. Each reminder creates a subtle hesitation. Hesitation makes ambition feel risky, and risk feels morally wrong. The rival frames fear as responsibility, creating confusion inside your judgment. Your decision-making becomes slower, heavier, less aligned with your real potential. Bandura once wrote that people restrain others to avoid confronting their own failures. A quiet rival restrains you because your rise forces them to face their own stagnation. Your success exposes their abandoned ambitions, forgotten dreams, and unrealized plans. Your presence becomes a mirror they cannot escape, so they try dimming your light. Another technique they use is identity disruption. Identity disruption happens when they question your evolving personality. They claim you are changing too fast, or becoming distant, or losing your original values. These statements trigger guilt, making you defend your growth instead of enjoying it. Defending growth drains emotional energy. You begin explaining your decisions more, doubting your pace, second-guessing direction. Your inner clarity becomes foggy as you process their repeated concerns. You start believing something is wrong with rising too quickly or confidently. Then comes the psychological trap called supportive pessimism. Supportive pessimism is when someone expresses concern in a way that sounds loving. They say they want you safe, but their version of safe keeps you predictable and small. They hide fear inside kindness, so you accept it without resistance. This trap is dangerous because it uses your own emotional openness against you. You trust their tone, not understanding that tone is a tool, not a truth. Their steady voice comforts your anxiety, even though they create the anxiety first. The cycle continues until their influence shapes every major decision you make. Quiet rivals also practice expectation softening. Expectation softening is when they subtly lower your belief in what is possible. They praise tiny steps but question every major leap. They normalize slow progress while making fast progress feel irresponsible. You start celebrating less, aiming lower, preparing for failure more than success. Your ambition becomes careful, then cautious, then quiet. This is the goal of expectation softening, to make your dreams feel unreasonable. Quiet rivals want you to think small, so their insecurity stays comfortably hidden. Another layer of manipulation is emotional equalization. Emotional equalization happens when they respond to your success with stories of their pain. They shift the emotional spotlight to themselves, making your achievement feel heavy. Your joy becomes guilt, your victory becomes pressure, your excitement becomes silence. This emotional equalization is not random, it protects their ego. If your success becomes the center, their insecurity becomes visible. So they pull the emotional tone downward until both of you feel neutral again. Neutrality is comfortable for them, but suffocating for your growth. Dark psychology identifies this pattern as silent containment. Silent containment keeps you within an invisible psychological boundary. You feel supported but never empowered, encouraged but never elevated. Your progress continues, but slower, softer, and always within limits they tolerate. The real danger is when you internalize their voice as your own. You begin hearing their caution inside your thoughts, even when they are not present. Your mind repeats their doubts automatically, turning their fear into your logic. Once internalized, the rival no longer needs to guide you, you guide yourself downward. This internal takeover is the final stage of quiet rivalry. Once reached, you stop needing external pressure because you start holding yourself back. Your ambition weakens, your clarity fades, your confidence fractures. Their influence becomes invisible but permanent, hidden inside your thinking patterns. The psychological twist now becomes deeply unsettling. If a quiet rival can reshape your inner voice without confrontation, what happens when your next level of success demands a mindset stronger than every emotional trap they have ever planted inside you? You think manipulation needs aggression, but the most powerful kind feels like care. You assume rivals reveal themselves, but the silent ones hide behind concern. If you want true freedom, you must learn to decode the voice inside your mind. The final layer of this hidden system begins when influence becomes internalized. A quiet rival no longer needs to speak because their patterns live in your thoughts. You begin predicting their reactions, adjusting your choices before they ever respond. You shrink yourself automatically, as if protecting their comfort has become instinct. This is not obedience, it is psychological conditioning. Conditioning happens when repeated emotional cues reshape your decision-making patterns. Their doubts echo inside your mind every time you attempt something ambitious. Your brain replays their fears until fear feels like logic and hesitation feels like wisdom. Dark psychology describes this state as internal displacement. Internal displacement means your authentic voice moves aside to make space for theirs. You do not notice this shift because it happens slowly and quietly. The voice that once pushed you forward now sounds softer and less certain. Machiavelli once said, if you want to control someone, control their hope. Quiet rivals learn to weaken hope through subtle emotional friction. Not by attacking dreams, but by questioning timing, stability, or readiness. Their goal is not to stop you completely, but to make you doubt your next step. This doubt becomes a psychological anchor. Anchors limit movement by tying your decisions to past emotional experiences. Every time you plan something new, the anchor pulls your focus back to caution. Your ambition becomes heavy, your progress slows down, your potential feels distant. Bandura once wrote that people transfer their fear to others to avoid facing it alone. Quiet rivals transfer their insecurities into your thinking without awareness. Their fear becomes your hesitation, their jealousy becomes your guilt. Their emotional limitations become your invisible boundaries. The final stage of quiet rivalry emerges when they shift from doubt to moral framing. Moral framing happens when they attach guilt to growth and innocence to stagnation. They suggest rapid progress changes people or causes distance or attracts bad influences. These statements sound ethical, but they anchor you to a smaller identity. You begin believing your growth must be managed quietly to avoid making others uncomfortable. You minimize victories, hide achievements, and celebrate in silence to maintain balance. You shrink your own success to keep their ego safe from emotional collapse. This emotional containment becomes the invisible cage that traps your potential. Another advanced method they use is thought redirection. Thought redirection shifts your attention from what you can control to what might go wrong. You start planning around fear instead of strategy, around limitation instead of possibility. This mental shift lowers your ambition without you noticing the process. The human mind adapts quickly to repeated emotional patterns. With enough repetition, doubt becomes your baseline, caution becomes your identity. Your decisions feel logical, but they come from emotional pressure, not clarity. Your potential remains suppressed because your inner world has been quietly rewritten. Quiet rivals rely on psychological predictability. They assume you will eventually choose comfort to avoid their subtle disapproval. They assume you will slow down to maintain balance in the relationship. They assume your fear of losing harmony is stronger than your desire to grow. But this assumption reveals their blind spot. They understand how to quiet your confidence, but not how to kill your ambition. Ambition never dies, it only sleeps beneath layers of emotional exhaustion. One moment of clarity can break years of subtle influence. That moment arrives when you recognize a painful truth. Your dreams did not shrink because they were unrealistic. Your dreams shrank because someone else's insecurity became your emotional guide. The voice limiting you was never yours, it was borrowed without permission. Dark psychology teaches that awareness interrupts manipulation instantly. The moment you name the influence, the spell breaks. You see the pattern, you feel the distortion, you sense the emotional weight lifting. You begin reclaiming space inside your own mind, one thought at a time. The first sign of reclaiming power appears as emotional detachment. You stop reacting to subtle criticism, indirect warnings, or cautious tones. Their doubts feel smaller, their words feel lighter, their presence feels less heavy. The emotional hook begins to loosen, and the internal anchor begins to dissolve. The second sign appears as identity reconstruction. You rebuild your confidence not through approval, but through clarity. Your choices become aligned with your vision instead of their comfort. Your next step feels natural instead of guilty or risky. The third sign is psychological distance. You begin seeing the quiet rival as a mirror of their own fears. Their jealousy becomes visible, their tension becomes readable, their mask becomes thin. You recognize their behavior as insecurity disguised as guidance. Your mind starts filtering their influence automatically. Their warnings become background noise, their concerns lose emotional power. You no longer absorb their tone or adjust your pace for their comfort. Your ambition returns with sharper clarity and stronger intention. But the final shift is the most transformative. You stop seeking validation from people who secretly benefit from your weakness. You stop sharing dreams with minds that cannot handle your potential. You stop aligning your goals with emotional boundaries that were never yours. Quiet rivals lose power the moment you realize you never needed their approval. Their influence depended on your willingness to honor their hidden expectations. Once that willingness dissolves, their emotional hold breaks completely. Their silence no longer controls your pace. Their reactions no longer shape your decisions. Dark psychology reveals a final truth about human behavior. People who secretly hope you fail cannot walk with you when you start rising. Your progress exposes their insecurities faster than their mask can adapt. Your confidence becomes a mirror they cannot face without confronting their own stagnation. As you rise, you see their discomfort more clearly. Their tone shifts, their posture tightens, their congratulations sound forced. The mask grows heavier for them, but lighter for you, because you no longer believe it. You no longer internalize their tension, you observe it with calm detachment. And then comes the final psychological twist. Their strategies stop working, not because you confront them, but because you outgrow them. Their influence collapses when your mindset grows larger than their emotional control. Their quiet rivalry becomes irrelevant, their doubts become meaningless, their mask becomes transparent. The question that completes this entire manual now stands in front of you. If quiet rivals could shape your inner world for so long without resistance, what happens when you build a mindset so strong that no envy, no subtle doubt, and no invisible pressure can ever enter your thoughts again?